Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And again, tonight we have the honor of hosting Mr. Magdy Abdel, our guest for Student Life Director, Disability and Ethics Trainer, again to shed light on today's significant celebration as well as Egypt's realization of the rights and potential of people with disabilities. Once again, Mr. Magdy, thank you so much for coming in this evening.
It's a pleasure.
Right, so of course today the President attended the 5th edition of the Differently Abled celebration along with the other officials. How do you view the significance of such a celebration? How does it symbolize, you know, the Republic's commitment, awareness of people with disabilities and efforts to create more inclusivity for them?
Of course, we know that in 2018 there was the Year of Disability,
yes,
and that was a very significant step in actually creating full inclusion of people with disabilities.
Yes.
And from there, we saw a lot of change in Egypt happen in terms of the awareness, in terms of the actual inclusion and accessibility of the places themselves. People started to understand what it means to have a disability and that we have many different types of disabilities. We're not dealing with one disability. We have the visual impairment, for example, we have the hard of hearing, we have the intellectual disability, we have the physical disability. I myself use a walker. So it's very important that we shed light on each type of disability and how we can assist in the proper way each of these type of disabilities rather than putting them in one basket, which used to happen in the past.
Indeed. So there's different kinds of disabilities and we need to cater for the different kinds of disabilities.
Exactly.
Right. So one of the cornerstones of the new Republic's approach is inclusivity to ensure access of quality education and employment for people with disability and with special needs, along of course with integrating them in inclusive, for example, educational practice with mainstream schools, providing support, do you believe in this quota system of including them in schools or employment?
Of course, you have to include the person with disability inside the classroom. He or she has to be integrated and fully included within the classroom. Once the students see the child that has a disability, they're going to consider that to be a norm.
Yes.
I'm going to grow up with the culture of having people with disabilities around me. So when I grow up, they're not going to be someone strange or someone stigmatized, which is a very important step. And not only that, the educational books themselves need to educate people that there is something called people with disabilities. And as we said, the different types of disabilities and how we can offer support in the best way.
Absolutely. And as you said, integration where they become the norm.
Exactly.
Part of our society. So creating an inclusive built environment is essential for ensuring the full participation of the different kinds of people with disabilities.
Of course.
Now this includes lots of steps. So we're talking about, for example, installation of ramps, for example, with people with wheelchairs, elevators, tactile paving, designated parking spaces, for example. People with visual impairment need their special books, the Braille system, to be available, for example, in schools, libraries, museums, wherever they go. How do you see, Egypt's efforts in some of these issues in regard, and what, in your opinion, still, is there room for development in?
There was actually a law that was put in place called the Code of Ethics, or Code al-Itaha, which basically makes that every building has to have the accessibility measures of people with disabilities included within the building itself. For example, the ramp, if we're talking about a ramp, if we're talking about the elevator, it needs to be there. If we're talking about older buildings that would be more difficult, we don't really have to break the older buildings because of their historical value, for example, but any new building, any new office, if it's a workplace, for example, has to have the accessibility measures of a person with disability involved. Not only in terms of physical accessibility, we're also talking about the accessibility within the World Wide Web, the internet, when they come to work, that they have the accessible headphones, for example, and screen readers for people that have visual impairments, and for example, the earpiece for a person that has hard of hearing or hears a little bit. So and big font, for example, as well. Lots of other things that could make it very easy for a person with disability to feel included. And one very important thing, a lot of these things are low cost.
And simple.
Yeah, they can feel integrated, and at the same time, the company is not paying a lot of money, or is not paying like an arm or a leg, as they say,
Yes, yes.
in order to accommodate. So if we start taking baby steps, I think we'll be able to reach to a fully inclusive society pretty soon.
Indeed. And of course, people with disabilities are productive. So
Exactly.
they should also be looked at as people who can contribute. They are
Definitely.
productive in society.
Definitely.
Egypt has also taken some steps to enhance social welfare, for example, healthcare services for people with special needs or disabilities, recognizing, of course, some of the unique support that they need. How do you see the state's efforts in this regard?
It's going good, but I also would recommend something that would really help. And I've had a lot of focus groups with people with disabilities that are asking, for example, if we're talking about a website, the website should be equipped to assist a person with a disability, regardless of the type of disability.
Right.
There should be a column within the website itself that assists a person with a disability, whether the disability is a visual disability or a hard of hearing disability or a mobility disability, whether we're talking about someone that doesn't know, for example, how to type easily, that he's able to access, for example, that column and get the services that are exclusive to people with disabilities, just like we have columns in other websites for the other services that are there. And I think that would really make it easy. And we're talking about all the different government offices having the same icon if we're talking about accessible websites.
Right. So, Mr. Magdy, we have now joining us over the telephone His Excellency Ambassador Gamal Bayoumidi, former Assistant Foreign Minister, who will also be joining us in today's edition of the Daily Debate. It's a very good evening to you, Your Excellency.
Good evening. How are you?
Ambassador Gamal, are you with us on the phone,
Yes.
sir?
Yes, yes.
Good evening. Good evening, Your Excellency. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Ambassador.
My pleasure.
Right. Mr. Ambassador, of course, today President Abdel al-Sisi participated in the fifth edition of the Differently Abled ceremony to empower people with disability and special needs. How do you see this event, marking Egypt's efforts or reflecting the state's efforts in fostering inclusivity and support with people with disabilities?
So happy to see such an event because we are celebrating with a good part of our country. They are our brothers, our sisters, and they are part of the family. And who did not live in his school with some people who need some help from us. And many of them proved to be on the top of their career.
Absolutely.
Look to Taha Hussein, one of our writers. He was partially disabled. And all of us, we read Taha Hussein. How we can deny the production of such a very important Egyptian figure. So I think it is our duty, all of us, to give whatever it takes to make them happier, to make them able to participate by producing whatever they can, whether by services or by goods or whatever they can do. So it's a matter of adapting ourselves to look to them in a positive way. And I am happy really with this event and the President. We thank the President, we thank all those who participate in this event.
Absolutely.
One more thing that also finance is very important, and the President gives enough finance in order to make those people a good part of our community. And I hope this will continue. I hope we can do whatever it makes them happier and more productive.
Absolutely. Your Excellency, as you said, President al-Sisi announced in the ceremony an allocation of 10 billion Egyptian pounds to the Differently Abled Fund. And also the President spoke about the role of NGOs as well as the private sector in providing services and support for people with disabilities. How do you see this? How does this statement reflect the role that they can play?
Yes, absolutely. I am a part of one NGO, which is the Arab Investors Union. we always talk about this part of our duty in the Arab League, and I think it is a sort of that we have to make people aware. It is a matter of awareness. We want everybody to be aware, and we are encouraging our members in the Investors Union to take care of such category of Egyptians and category of Arabs in order to benefit from them and to make them happier at the same time.
Absolutely, Your Excellency. Egypt ratified the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2008, signaling its commitment to international standards of inclusivity. How do you read this in light of the efforts by the state, and what, in your opinion, is there room to achieve this?
Very good that we make the whole international community aware of such a subject. And it gives a payback, because many organizations of the United Nations and many regional organizations, they give very strong finance to support whatever we are doing for our citizens in such a way. So, very important that we join the international efforts in order to tackle this subject, and I hope that this is the right decision we take in the right time.
Absolutely. Your Excellency, Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, the former Assistant Foreign Minister, I'd like to thank you very, very much, sir, for joining us this evening on tonight's edition of the Daily Debate. Thank you very much for your insight. And back to you, Mr. Magdy. One of the very important things that was mentioned in today's event was the role of non-governmental organizations. And I know you also play a big role, and you're a member of a non-governmental organization. Tell me, as a practitioner on the ground, someone who is a disability and ethics trainer, who works at an NGO. Tell me the role that NGOs can play to, on the ground, better the lives of people with disabilities, to assist them to reach their full potential and their full productivity in society and in their communities as well.
We can all play, the NGOs in general can play a vital role, especially if we work together, because I feel like, for example, many NGOs, they work on a specific area of disability, rather than us collaborating together as one force to create real big change. So rather than us focusing on small pieces, we put the pieces of the puzzle together and we work together as one big unit. I think we're going to be able to achieve a lot of things together, because, of course, 10 minds is better than one mind working alone. So that's the area that needs to be highlighted, in a sense. And I am part of an NGO that we focus on the idea of training people to understand, as I mentioned, the different types of disabilities, and what's the added value for a person with disability to be added to the workforce. Because you might think, it's a burden, I'll have to make the place accessible and everything, but the idea of having a person with disability is very good in a lot of ways. First of all, it's diversity within the company itself. And second of all, you have the person with disability might lack a certain skill, but might be very powerful in another skill. So we need to focus on that, focus on what the person with disability can do. And then altogether, if we're talking about around 20 million people with disabilities now in Egypt, so we can just imagine the force the 20 million people can do, the impact and the change and the progress the people with disabilities can do altogether if they are given the chance in Egypt, of course.
Absolutely. Let me ask you, what are some of the most significant initiatives that you've worked in and that you've seen taken by the state with regards to allowing for more employment opportunities for people with disabilities, as well as more economic empowerment for this sector and this part of our society?
If we talk about, for example, the 5% quota, which is a quota that needs to be included within every company in order for the company to be working properly, that's a good step. But I also would want it to be broader. I would think about it from the angle, if a person with a disability has the skills to be enrolled in a company, then we should give him or her the opportunity. Regardless of if we're talking about the 5% quota or we're not talking about the 5% quota. For example, if we find a pool of people with disabilities and the quota, for example, is 10% or 15% within the company, that's not a problem because at the end of the day, as we mentioned, people with disabilities add a lot of value, and a lot of the things that maybe a person with a disability cannot do, a person with disability can do, and can do much better than a person that doesn't have a disability. So we focus on the person rather than focusing on the disability. We focus on what the person can do rather than on what the person can't do when we talk about a person with disability. And I would like to thank the country actually for the efforts that they put in making the places accessible. There's a lot of places now that are accessible to some extent. Of course, there's a lot of things that still can be done. And me, on behalf of the consultancy or the NGO that I'm part of, we've done a lot of things on the ground, including accessibility of metro stations and accessibility of actual malls and government institutions as well as the private sector. But there's still a lot more to do. And as I mentioned, if we put our hands together, all of our hands together, and have the correct funding and the correct direction that the government puts us on, I think we can achieve a lot for Egypt in terms of accessibility and inclusion.
Absolutely. And this is a very important topic, and which leads me to my next question about legislation. How do you see, legislation? Are you satisfied with the legislation that caters for people with disabilities or special needs, or do you see more can be done in order to really give them their rights as part of Egyptian citizens?
If we talk about legislation, of course there's a lot of legislation being put on the table. Like for example, the new laws for people with disabilities that was passed by the parliament, and the government approved it, and it's written and everything's great. But we have a little bit of a lack when it comes to the implementation of the actual laws themselves. We have written laws that are perfect. But when we come and look at how they were implemented, or if they were implemented in the first place, we find that there is no implementation. So I would encourage, as much as possible, that we focus, okay, we have the laws in place and they're perfect laws and everything. Let's focus more altogether, private, public sector, the country altogether, on implementing these laws and putting pen on paper, as they say.
Yes, absolutely, right. Right, Mr. Magdy, and ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a short break and we'll be back to continue tonight's edition of the Daily Debate. Do stay tuned.